This week on Government Matters.
Is he an ideologue? Is he a bomb maker? Is he a leader of the network?
Researchers at the University of Maryland use big data to predict terrorist leaders in the making.
The government for the past several years, since 2007, has released the total amount it spends on intelligence spending, but has never provided any breakdown beyond that number.
The Washington Post Black Budget Report offers a first ever look at the meteoric rise of CIA spending.
As a consumer, would never think of buying simply on the basis of cost.
How can federal agencies deliver in a market so focused on cost? I sit down with PSC President Stan Sulloway. Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
Thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every Sunday we'll bring you the week's top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. Topping headlines this Sunday, VA pay. According to a new report, the Department of Veterans Affairs doled out $150 million in 2011 to roughly 80% of the VA's 22,500 physicians. That's an average of about $8,000 per doctor. Here's the kicker. Some of those doctors received bonuses despite having performance-related action taken against them. The Government Accountability Office says the VA should set clear goals and increase oversight. It's one of the main reasons behind VA Accountability Watch, a new push by Republican Representative Jeff Miller. President Obama has issued an alternative federal pay plan setting an across-the-board increase for civilian federal workers. The 1% raise in 2014 would be their first in about 3 years. The figure itself comes as no surprise. It matches Obama's 2014 budget proposal. That said, it's not the final word. Government Executive reports Congress can overturn the increase. They return from August recess this coming week. The Pentagon's acquisition staff will be ready to delay and even cancel programs ahead of 2014 budget cuts. Undersecretary Frank Kendall tells the Washington Post he's already holding off on some spending. Kendall says the defense industry will shoulder most of the sequestration burden. Here's a quote. "We're going to have to make some hard choices in the next few weeks about what we do with some of our programs. Companies that are in the defense business need to be in it for the long term." Last March, the Obama administration announced a big data research and development initiative. The goal? Challenge U.S. industry and research leaders to tap huge volumes of the federal government's digital data. Some researchers at the University of Maryland have answered that call. They used public data to predict leadership changes within terrorist networks. Hatsavella reports.
This new computer software shows terrorist organizations are complex, intricate networks. It's called STONE, which stands for Shaping Terrorist Organizational Network Efficacy. Researchers at the University of Maryland who developed the program say it's brand new technology, something we've never seen before. The program is designed to answer the following.
Who exactly is in these organizations? How are they connected to each other? And how can we use knowledge of that to predict how the organization will restructure itself when a leader dies or when he's captured.
Dr. V.S. Subramanian is a computer science professor who has been working on the program. He tells Government Matters the program is fed solely by open source data, information you and I can find. Right now, the data focuses on groups like Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. The red shapes represent individuals. The form of the shape tells you if the person is alive, captured, or dead. Click on one of them and you'll find out the person's role and influence in the network.
Is he an ideologue? Is he a bomb maker? Is he a leader of the network?
Based on information, they can even predict who is likely to take over a group.
It may turn out that the replacement of that person, when he steps into a higher role, is much more competent, much more deadly, or some combination thereof.
In past models, the researchers claim they have been able to pinpoint 3 or 4 possible replacements. They were right 4 out of 5 times. Aaron Manis is a researcher and terrorism expert who helps gather and understand the data this software puts out.
When you're talking about even a small terrorist group with a few hundred people, you're talking about a network that is hard for a human brain to systematically comprehend. But the computer can systematically look at all of the connections and identify what might be important and what isn't.
The program just part of the equation. Researchers say it works best when it collaborates with a human analyst.
These guys admit that they've been in touch with several organizations who seem interested in the program, but for security reasons, they would not elaborate. From the Satellite Center, Hat Savella for Government Matters.
Now this week's big names in the business of government. The Federal Communications Commission named Dr. David Bray as Chief Information Officer. According to an FCC release, Bray will implement a tech-forward strategy, cut costs, and move the agency toward more secure cloud-based solutions. Bray started working for the federal government 2 decades ago. Last year, he won the prestigious Arthur S. Fleming Award. The U.S. Army Cyber Command also welcomed a new leader this week. FCW reports Lieutenant General Edward Carden was sworn in on Tuesday. Carden previously served as Commanding General of the 2nd Infantry Division in South Korea and Commanding General for support of U.S. forces in Iraq. We'll turn from headlines to tech, straight ahead on Government Matters. For years, the finer points of U.S. intelligence spending were closely guarded government secrets. Then, the Washington Post pulled back the curtain. Greg Miller details the black budget. Next. In Tech Matters, the black budget. For the first time, the U.S. public knows just how much and where the federal government invests money in intelligence gathering. The 178-page budget summary was one of many documents obtained by the Washington Post from former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. For more, we turn to our guest on Government Matters, Greg Miller, staff writer and co-author of the Post Black Budget Report. Greg, before we get into the details, put the number $52.6 billion into context for us. What did the public know about intelligence spending before you published the summary, and what do they know now?
Well, the number you just cited is pretty much the limit of what the public knew before our stories a week or so ago, because the government for the past several years, since 2007, has released the total amount it spends on intelligence spending, but has never provided any breakdown beyond that number. So we did know that was roughly how much was being spent, but we didn't know how much it was going to each agencies, let alone how much was going to specific programs within those agencies.
Spending by the CIA surprised nearly everyone. Here's a quote from your report. It surged past that of every other spy agency with $14.7 billion in requested funding for 2013. The figure vastly exceeds outside estimates and is nearly 50% above that of the National Security Agency. Why does that come as such a surprise?
I think there's 2 reasons that it comes as a surprise. The first is that although the CIA is the most recognized name in U.S. intelligence, it's never been the largest spy agency, or at least it hadn't been until after September 11th. And the other reason is that the CIA took a lot of blame for failures leading up to the attacks on September 11, as well as the failures regarding the weapons intelligence in Iraq before the U.S. invasion there in 2003. So the agency, there were times when there were members of Congress who were saying the agency should be disbanded, should be stripped of much of its authority and power. So the idea that it emerges from this 10-year period as far and away the biggest winner in this budget, in this massive spending era, is kind of surprising.
And very timely that you mentioned this, because next week Americans will mark the 12th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Intelligence spending has increased exponentially since then. Have those funds been effective?
Well, I think that if you ask anybody in the intelligence community, they'd say the first priority, the central priority for all of that spending was to prevent a follow-on attack on the scale of September 11th, and by that measure they clearly have succeeded. I mean, the Al-Qaeda network that carried out that attack is in tatters now. Osama bin Laden is dead, and many of his senior operatives are also dead or in custody. But the budgets also point to new threats that the U.S. intelligence community is really struggling to get its arms around, including homegrown terrorism, such as the attacks in the Boston Marathon earlier this year. And many of these sort of homegrown terrorists have cited 9/11, the drone program, as inspiration for their deeds.
And Greg, the 16 U.S. spy agencies are organized around 5 priorities: terrorism, nuclear weapons, critical events overseas, foreign espionage, and cyber operations. Those areas only stand to get more complex. Do you have any indication where the intelligence budget will go from here?
Well, there are actually projections in these documents that show where they expect to be 5 years years out, and for the most part, they are stagnant. So after this 10 or 12-year period of massive buildup, they've plateaued. This year's budget is down slightly from 2 years ago, but they don't forecast any cliff. You know, there's no big drop-off coming for the intelligence community. It's going to stay as big as it is now.
After your report was published in the Post, what kind of reaction from the defense and contracting communities has it prompted?
Well, I think that there's been a mixed reaction. I mean, there's been some criticism of the Post for publishing some of this information, as well as a significant amount of praise. It was a carefully considered thing to release some of this information, and we held a lot of operational detail back. And if you saw the very first story, you know, we quoted Lee Hamilton, who was the co-chairman of the committee or the commission that investigated the 9/11 attacks, and he's among a number of influential people who fought very hard to get disclosures like this to happen. So I think the debate now is only really starting to begin.
Good job. Keep up the great work. We'll have you back from time to time as you get more information like this. Greg Miller, staff writer for The Washington Post. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
We'll turn from tech to security, straight ahead on Government Matters. This year, the Syrian Electronic Army proved to be a thorn in the side for more than one big media company. This week, they graduated to Marines.com. Should federal agencies like the DoD be prepared for retaliatory cyber attacks? Alan Friedman from Brookings weighs in next. In security matters, protecting federal computer systems from hackers. On Labor Day, the Marine Corps recruiting website temporarily redirected visitors to a message from the Syrian Electronic Army. The same group of hackers claimed responsibility for disrupting the New York Times, Twitter, and other media sites. This as President Obama seeks approval from Congress for a limited military strike against Syria. Joining me now with the latest on Government Matters is Alan Friedman, Research Director for the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Alan, tell us about the Syrian Electronic Army. Who are they, and how do they compare to other hacking networks worldwide?
Well, the Syrian Electronic Army is not terribly sophisticated, but they are persistent, and they are also a little bit clever. Like several other of the hacking organizations that we've seen, it's more of a loose affiliation. Anyone can sort of self-declare, although what makes this different from other issues is, one, it's tied to an international political conflict, and also it's been explicitly endorsed by the president of Syria, Assad, who said that they were an excellent fighting force for them. They've been fairly effective at taking down some major websites, but they've done so in a fairly clever fashion. They haven't used astounding amounts of technical prowess. What they do is they phish important IT actors, send them an email, get them to click a wrong link, but they don't even have to go after the organizations themselves. They've figured out who these major targets are using as their IT support systems, and they're subverting that way. So they're not expert hackers, but they are very good at social engineering. At the same time, they've tackled some of the larger organizations. They've tackled Israeli organizations, but they weren't really able to do much other than take down a few of the smaller government websites in Israel. They didn't have a long-term effect.
Well, they're not experts, but there's certainly some smart black hatters. Now, I mentioned Marines.com. Has the Syrian Electronic Army targeted any other federal domains?
No, they haven't. Well, they may have targeted them. They certainly haven't been successful. Their MO has been to essentially try to trick IT professionals into turning over particular credentials, and from that turning that into an escalating attack, taking over the domain name system. And we haven't seen any other success outside of the Marines.com, which isn't technically a DoD domain.
Now, Alan, how are federal agencies positioned to withstand these domain name system attacks?
I think they're fairly well positioned. DNS security has been important and a priority, and certainly as the federal government has worked on consolidating their data centers and their web presence, they've focused on making sure that there are single chains of command and that people are able to communicate when there is a crisis. So if they are able to trick any particular actor into making a mistake, we'll be able to recover fairly quickly. You've got to remember that taking down a website isn't really a major attack. It's just changing the billboard for a short period of time.
The military is certainly aware of this threat. NextGov reports DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency, sent out a notice to contractors on August 22nd. What are they worried about?
What DIS is worried about is something that's a little broader and more insidious, which is corrupting the domain name security system in general. The idea that if you type in www.brookings.edu, you may think you're getting to my website, but if an attacker is in between you and your network, they can serve you a fake website and you would not realize it. Domain name security, or DNSSEC, will help defend against that. This is critical, of course, for military security and for all security. DIS has made this an important priority.
Alan, briefly, this coming week, Congress might authorize a limited military strike on Syria. If they do, how could it impact what we're discussing today?
I think it could have an impact, especially because anyone can join the Syrian Electronic Army. And we do know that some of the actors have ties with Russia, the Russian hacking community. So it's possible that if people in Russia feel that the United States is being unfair or bullying Syria, we might see an escalation and more sophisticated people joining this under the banner of the Syrian Electronic Army.
This is just the start of hackers across the world. It's becoming big news because of what's going on in Syria. Stay on top of it for us, Alan. Alan Friedman with the Brookings Institution. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll turn from security to management straight ahead on Government Matters. It's no big secret that federal budgets are tight, but cost-saving methods like reverse auctions don't always make sense. Stan Soloway outlines a long-term procurement strategy straight ahead. Welcome back to Government Matters. In this era of austere budgets, federal agencies can adopt several cost savings methods to acquire goods and services. They include strategic sourcing, reverse auctions, and awarding contractors who meet LPTA requirements. That's the lowest price technically acceptable. In the short term, these methods save money. But is the government sacrificing innovation in a market obsessed with cost? It's a topic I discussed with Stan Soloway of the Professional Services Council. I think reverse auctions provide an interesting case study for this discussion. In July, former Defense Undersecretary Michelle Flournoy told the Wall Street Journal that reverse auctions saved the Pentagon $100 million in fiscal year 2011 and 2012. Put that into context for us.
Well, first of all, $100 million against $500 billion of spend is a small amount. It's not insignificant. I think the key to what Michelle Flournoy was pointing out is that there are tools available like reverse auctions where you as the seller are bidding against your competitors to get the price lower, so I will buy your product. It works very well for things like rock salt or oil or even cell phones. Where it doesn't work so well, where it's actually a dangerous tool, is when you're dealing with more sophisticated requirements where you don't want just the bottom line dirt level price because you need certain capabilities, the ability to improve and so forth.
This summer, the General Services Administration launched its own reverse auction website. Why?
Well, because they're trying to expand the use of reverse auctions, and the key is going to be, do they use them in the most appropriate areas? Are they using them for, as I said earlier, pure commodities? Are they using them for things that really price is the principal determinant because the products out there are essentially the same? Once you get above that level, and you're talking about people, engineering services, that kind of a thing, you need to avoid that mentality because the mentality of driving price down may seem helpful to a short-term budget need, but it can be very devastating to your long-term best interests in quality and continuous improvement and so forth.
Steve Kellman, who sits on the FedBid Board of Advisors, told FCW he's worried the GSA will seek to establish itself as the monopoly source of supply, essentially making government agencies dependent on an inferior government supplier. Do you share those concerns?
I think competition in the government market is a good thing. You know, we talk about it a lot with industry. We want a lot of competition. I think having a competitive marketplace, if you will, of contracts and contract vehicles is very healthy. Will GSA become a monopoly? I don't think so. Will they become more dominant than they are? It's possible. But the key is to recognize that for every time you create what we in the business would refer to as a contract vehicle that looks really good, somewhere down the road, much like technology, somebody's going to come up with a better idea. And you want to have the aperture wide enough that you can have that competitive pressure to drive quality, not only in terms of the suppliers you're buying from, but also in terms of who's doing the buying from the government side.
Reverse auctions and other federal IT trends have three things in mind: save money, improve contracting, and enhance transparency. But number one, money seems to be trumping everything else these days. How can agencies deliver in a market so focused on cost?
Well, that's a critical question, and I think it's one of the hardest questions that we're seeing. If you went across, we have 370 member companies. It's a large organization. Almost to a company, they would tell you the biggest challenge in the market is that it's a low-price market, even when the government's buying things that you, as a consumer, would never think of buying simply on the basis of cost. How do I bring innovation to the space? How do I bring constant improvement? How do I bring the right high skills to the marketplace when cost is being driven down? I think the way you can drive that transparency is by a substantially improved training and development of the workforce. A different cultural approach. A lot of the workforce will tell you, I may be making a low price decision, but no one ever got in trouble for spending too little money. What we need to do is be encouraging the workforce to make smart buying decisions, and I think their leadership is trying to do that, but of course implementation lags, and so we have a lot of work to do there.
We'll turn from management to final matters straight ahead. FCW announced its list of 2013 Rising Stars this week. It's made up of people all in the business of government who have made quite a mark in the first 10 years of their federal IT careers. This year's list includes 12 federal workers and 3 in the private sector. Each will be celebrated on October 16th at the GCN Awards Gala. Thanks for being with us. I'm Morris Jones. Your week is filled with other matters. Safe Sundays for us.